Hey, it's Greg. This is the Square Pizza Pod, cooked up by Shermco. Miss Maya, welcome to the Square Pizza Pod.
Hello, how are you today, Greg?
We are wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. It's Wednesday. It's the middle of the week. Another fast-breaking news week. 2025 has come in like a lion, but since we started spring, I'm hoping it goes out like a lamb. So,
I like. Might have to borrow that. We already dropping bars 20 seconds in. Well done.
MC Maya,
Yeah. MC Maya. Oh man, perfect. And you were sharing before we jumped on. I know I think are normally in DC, but today you're in New York.
Yes, I came here with my family. My husband works for the NBA running their social justice coalition and had to come here for work. And we decided to bring grandma and the toddler. And so it has been a New York adventure.
I love that. I know we're going to talk about you, I think, mostly during our time together. But if you feel comfortable, what's going on with the NBA and your husband's work at the coalition seems cool.
Yeah, no. So he started the coalition, which was founded after the bubble by the players, the governors, and the league together, and the Players Association. And so he is executive director of the coalition. They work on criminal justice reform, voting rights, and public safety. So they are, and you do it. And between all those different entities, they've done a reentry forum in Utah with the Jazz, which has been great. So helped many people get their records expunged, and have done some of those around the country. They've honored the 50-year anniversary of the Cleveland Summit, where Kareem Abdul-Jabbar from the NBA and a number of different players across leagues came together to talk about social justice. So, and they, just keep the league and all of its team members and governors and players, and as well as its fans, abreast of what's going on around issues that matter to them in a bipartisan way. So,
wow.
Yeah, so it's nice to have a household full of social justice.
Yeah, as I know it's focused on social justice, but is there anything he can do to make the Charlotte Hornets a better basketball team?
He doesn't have command in that way. So, nobody knows the trades when they're happening. That is fact. But, he can make sure that the Charlotte Hornets are taking care of the people of Charlotte and being good community partners. So around the issues. So that's more of his role.
And I know are usually based in DC, as we said, but I think your bio that I read said 6th generation in DC. So you guys have some family blood there. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my family came to DC after emancipation. So when we were freed from slavery, we came to the District of Columbia, the Martin family, and have been there since the mid 1800s. There's a book called Black Georgetown Remembered, because a little known fact is that Georgetown used to have a large Black community. And my great-great-grandfather, George Martin, is on the cover. He owned a laundromat. He owned a movie theater for Black Washingtonians at a time when DC was segregated, and a number of other businesses. And then that land turned into other businesses my family owned. So they owned a parking garage. It's the site now of the Fairfield Hotel at 24th and M. So the Fairmont Hotel at 24th and M. So, it's been a long journey in the district, but crazily enough, my family is the last set of Martins left. So I'm the last of my generation, and my son, who's the 7th generation, is the last, and he's actually a Martin Cadogan, but he's the last because everyone else has moved away. And that's the story of gentrification in a lot of our communities. But we are, almost 200 years strong in the district.
What is your favorite part about the district?
I love its people, right? So, I'm a little biased because my family's been here for a while. And so I couldn't go much of anywhere before I left for college without running into a family member. People used to call my grandparents if I was out doing something to tell them what any of us should or should not be doing. So, DC is a big city, but it's also a small town in a lot of ways. A lot of our residents are people who came up in the Great Migration from the South. We have just people who have a good heart and who care about creating a community of folks. My family, interestingly, two of my grandparents met at Dunbar High School, which was at the time one of the preeminent high schools in the country, and it sent a number of students, all Black students, when DC was segregated, to college, right? So it was one of the highest performing high schools in the country. Most of the students went on to go to college, and one of my grandparents from New York was sent, so my mom's family is from New York, she was sent to live with family, her aunt in DC, to go to Dunbar. And so I learned years later, my grandparents were sitting on the couch one day and said to my mom and I, your grandmother went to school with us. And we were like, no, she didn't. She lived in New York. She's not from DC. And they're like, no. We remember her because she was a New York girl who was super well dressed. And so we called my grandmother and we were like, so Granddaddy and Granny swear you went to Dunbar. And she was like, I did. It was for 2 years because my family wanted me to have a better high school and they didn't want me to stay around your grandfather because I was a little too close to him. So they sent me there for 2 years to go to the best high school in the country. And she was like, but I came back and graduated from New York school. And they were correct. And this was, late 20s, early 30s. So interesting times in terms of, and that's a legacy of DC, right? We have a legacy of, people caring for each other, of trying to create great schools for kids, and trying to make sure that our people have what they need, even though we don't have statehood, right? So there are a lot of things we don't have control over, but what we do, our people take good care of each other to make sure we get.
Speaking of community and connections, we got connected through Dewey Norwood, who's a mutual friend and a mentor of mine. We've done some work with, but curious how you and Dewey have been able to collaborate together.
Yeah, so I met Dewey years ago at a gala, at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund gala. And so I was there with another table of folks, and Dewey and I were sitting next to each other, and we just hit it off, right? We were just, kindred souls. And so we just started talking about stuff, and we've been connected ever since. And so we've just had good conversations about the work he does and Wells Fargo does to invest in the community, and the work we do at PAVE to make sure that we're taking care of our community. So, sometimes those fancy black tie events, you get just good soul feeding conversation. And that was my conversation with Dewey.
That's great. And I know we're getting to know each other, and our listening audience is getting to know you, and we're going to go deeper about who you are and the great work you're leading. But yeah, as we start, what do you want to share about who kind of Maya is, and what do you want the listening audience to know about you?
Yeah, so I'm an unknowing founder. I did not plan to found something. I think that's always an interesting thing because people like to come to me and they're like, Maya, tell me the plan and how you founded something. I was like, I didn't. I stumbled upon it. I was just somebody who was working in DC education and really cared about our community and our kids, and other people asked me if I wanted to do something about it. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I like receiving a paycheck every 2 weeks, and good benefits, as my family told me, are really important. And instead I became a founder, and now I provide people's paychecks and I have to fundraise for it, and I make sure they have good benefits. And so, sometimes I think people think you have to go on a path. And to me, I just believe you have to follow a purpose, and the purpose will build a path for you. So I'm a different kind of founder than probably most that we see out there who've been planning for years for where the destination they're trying to get to. I think the other thing about me is I'm a nerd. I love everything from musicals to comics to science to art. But if I can learn it, I want to know it. And so part of my love and belief in schools is that that's what schools should be for every kid, right? School is a safe space for me, in order for me to grow my knowledge. And I just think every kid should feel that way. And I noticed that every kid didn't, right? I had a different experience than other students. So wanted to, in my work, make that possible. And so if you hit me with anything, whether or not it's things that are in a textbook or things that are in pop culture, I've probably consumed it, and I love to know it. So I'm excited to talk about my musical selections, although right now I'm a toddler mom. So my Spotify Wrapped was really not what it usually is. But no, so that's just a little bit about me.
Who is your favorite comic right now?
My favorite comic book or comedian. So because those are, so I like comic books.
Oh, comic books. Okay.
I'm an X-Men fan. Don't know if you
Okay.
watched the X-Men 97. I felt like I was taken back to when, to high school, and I used to run home and all my friends were like, where are you going? And I was like, I got to get home in time for X-Men because I got to watch it. One of my parents recently told me that I'm like Rogue because I got this gray hair growing in and a patch. And I was like, that's okay. Rogue is a badass woman. So, I'm not mad about that, and don't touch me because I don't want to have to kill you as Rogue does. So when you touch her skin, but no, so comics, I'm an X-Men fan.
Good.
My husband and I go back and forth. My husband's a big DC Comics guy. I believe in Marvel, but Marvel has been struggling lately. So
some beef in the household.
A little beef, but he likes the angst, right? Like the Batman and Superman kind of bring, and I just like the joy. And then comedians, I don't know. I love everybody. I ran into Chris Rock in an elevator once. Chris Rock is my husband's favorite comedian. We get in this elevator. He does not recognize him. And I am trying to signal to him without telling him while we're standing in this tiny elevator with Chris Rock, that is Chris Rock.
He doesn't recognize Chris Rock.
He did not recognize Chris Rock.
You started with a lot of glowing things at your husband at first, and then we went left about not recognizing Chris Rock. Respectfully to the husband. Yeah.
And he didn't even notice. And we were in this fancy hotel, and I was like, that is clearly Chris Rock. And so we looked it up, and he argued with me, and then we looked up, and he was playing a show that night. And I was like, see, I told you that was Chris Rock. And Chris Rock was definitely trying to check us out, right? So he was like, who's that? Chris Rock's had some hard times lately with some of his jokes. So, but I think Chris Rock is hilarious. So.
Then speaking of paths and professional paths, I know part of that for you was starting at new schools, and we've been able to have Francis on the podcast and know so much great work is happening previously, but also continues to happen at new schools. So I'd love if you could just share what that experience was like for you on your path to DC PAVE.
Yeah. So when I started PAVE, the new schools at the time had these like local city funds. And so there was the DC City Fund, and it spun off to be what's now called Education for DC, which is our local education champion. I don't know what they're called this week. Sometimes they're harbor masters, sometimes they're champions. But now they're our education champion. And so the folks at DC, the DC City Fund of New School Venture Fund, had this new program that New School Venture Fund was launching called Entrepreneurs in Residence, which is exactly what I described to you, where they approached me like, hey, Maya, you're in a lot of rooms, like kind of like saying things that other people aren't saying and pushing everybody. We need to do things differently. Do you want to do something about that? And so they offered me this role as an entrepreneur in residence to take a leap, to get some funding for 6 months. And it was not committed to identifying that I was going to create an organization. It was also like, maybe there's an organization that's out there that it's best for us to bring to DC. I visited a lot of places. I went to California, I went to New York, I went to Boston. I traveled all around, and I just felt like everything I saw, I had things that I could learn from and things that I could bring, but nothing felt DC to me. And one of the things I think is important is that because of that description I gave of you in the beginning about DC, I think people forget that place matters, right? And that each place is a little different. It doesn't, and that I think a lot of times we think, just because kids are kids or people are people, it's all the same. And yet you have to know the heartbeat of a place to know what's going to work and what's not going to work, to know when you're putting together an event, what makes that event matter to the people that live there. It's the kind of music you play. It's kind of the food you pick. It's the way you structure the agenda. And I didn't see anything that felt DC to me. Like, even if you could bring the model and components of it, I didn't feel like I saw anything that I thought, if you put it here, it would work. And so I kind of talked myself into a job, to be honest, because I wanted this to be a DC thing, right? I wanted us to feel the DC beat in the work that we did with parents. And so I think what New Schools did a great job of is giving me that time to go and learn and to figure out what I wanted it to be, because most people don't get that kind of freedom, right? You have to, as a founder, you're usually struggling on the side, versus they gave me the funding to be able to support myself and to do all the travel and to like put together the concept paper and then to submit the 501c3. And so I had all the support to be able to do that. And it was transformational. And it's the only reason that PAVE exists today.
Yeah, and keep going then. Yeah, and make that natural bridge of how that experience from new schools led to what we know as PAVE, and give folks an overview of the work you're currently leading.
Yeah, so I didn't have an org name when I had that new school's funding. So I was a charter leader myself. And so I just called up, and I was a charter leader who had also worked on something called My School DC, which is our common lottery and application system for all of our public schools, both charter and DCPS, which is our traditional public school system. And so I had relationships in the charter sector because I was a charter leader and trust there. But I also had relationships and trust in DCPS because I had friends that I'd now made through this public policy making process we had done together cross sector. And when I started PAVE, DCPS was like, okay, we're glad you're doing this, but we'll wait and see what it becomes. And to be honest, I felt like that was the best thing they could have told me. They didn't tell me no. They didn't tell me we're opposed to this. They said, Maya, come back to me. Like once you've done something with this. But the charter leaders were like, oh, Maya, whatever you want to do, just don't do anything crazy. We'll send you some parents. And so unlike a lot of organizers, I think, have to go out there and start from ground zero, I didn't. So those leaders each gave me, about 30 leaders each gave me 2 to 3 parents. I just asked them for who's driving you crazy right now, that comes into your office and wants to like talk to you about everything that's happening and wants you to fix it immediately, because those are your best advocates. And I'd love to talk to them. And I'd love to give them a way for them to get together with parents across all schools to fight for the things that are going to be best for our kids that require systems level change, right? Not just that it's about the school, it's also about how the system is investing in our kids and how we are thinking about what policy looks like. And so there's a week called National School Choice Week. And so I knew that was like a natural way that charter parents would love to come out and share their stories. And I also knew I wanted to hear their stories, and I wanted to hear what they wanted to talk about when they were able to sit down and break bread with their policymakers and elected officials, and the wheels were taken off and they could talk about anything that mattered to them and what they felt like were the things that need to change for their children. So I hosted 7 events by myself in one day because I didn't have enough time to do multiple days. So it was 2 days over that week. And I had 65 parents that came out to those sessions of the about 90 that people had sent me, which was a huge deal because the days that I did it, the first day was the first day back from Snowzilla, which was a huge snowstorm that had shut down our schools for a week. And so when the schools were closed, and I knew I had already scheduled these things to start on a Monday, or it was like whatever that week was, the first day back, basically, that schools had reopened and people were supposed to go back to work. But I called everybody during the snow week because I was like, I know parents, they've been in there with those kids for forever and they would love to talk to another rational adult. And so I started calling them like Thursday, Friday.
Strategy. Love
Exactly.
it.
And
Yeah.
because I was like, I know my own mother. She wanted me to get up out there. Please, somebody take her. Right. So I called all the parents myself one by one, and I had a conversation with each of them over the course of 2 days. And I just told them, look, you're going to sit around. I got conference room tables at the Wilson building, which is our seat of government in DC locally. You're going to sit around the table. You're going to break bread. It's just going to be breakfast or lunch. You get to just tell your story. So share your name, where your children go to school, and what the best thing about that school is. And then I want you to ask any question that you want of that policymaker in the open session about the things that matter to you. And so I enlisted some friends as volunteers because I'm not an X-Men actually, so I couldn't be in multiple places at once. And I was also receiving the food and setting up the rooms. And so I needed people to be note takers. And there were themes that came out about what parents cared about and what parents felt like the challenges were. And I knew all the council members, so I was able to get all those meetings recorded, our meetings set up. And so we hosted those 7 meetings. So we had council members, the chairman of the council, we had the deputy mayor for education, and we just sat down and we talked. And it was an amazing set of conversations. And I think what the council members and the folks in the mayor's office really liked is that usually they had to go out to constituents, and this time constituents came to them. It was surprising to me that so many of our parents who are Native Washingtonians had never been in this building. And that's the building where our government sits, right? Like their mayor sits there, our council members sit there, and they had never been inside the building. They're like, this is the first time I've ever been in the Wilson building. And then they were also impressed that they got to sit down and have lunch or breakfast. I didn't want it to be a formal, sterile meeting. I wanted it to feel like you were equals at the table, which is what you feel like when you break bread with someone, right? And so they were really open conversations. Parents talked about school funding. They talked about the kind of programs they wanted for their kids, out of school time programs. They talked about their students' mental health needs. They talked about a lot of things that were just really interesting, and nobody kind of anticipated that these were the things that everyone cared about. What also, when one parent talked about it, the other parent's like, yeah, me too. I've been experiencing that. And these parents didn't know each other. And a lot of those parents have been with us to this day. I didn't anticipate that. I thought I would do this like kind of organizing cycle, like year over year. I was a student of Marshall Gans, who helped to create Obama's field campaign in 2008 for his campaign. And Marshall is like really big on public narrative. And so I knew how to do this public narrative storytelling, but I thought for sure it'd be like an annual cycle where people cycle in and out, kind of like you do with a campaign. Our parents have never wanted to leave. So that's a different challenge that we have organizing wise. But many of those parents are still with us to this day and still advocating. And I think they're really proud of what they've been able to accomplish together. And so 8 of those parents helped me form a board of directors. I didn't need a board to help me fundraise because I had a lot of funder relationships already and was able to do that. I need a board that was going to help me put together the business plan, a mission, a vision, a set of core values that we had as an organization, write what the activities would be that we wanted to do, and think about the program. And that's what we did. And so today we are a network of a little over 7,000 parents across the district, of which about 150 of those are parents who are testifying, running meetings, organizing other parents. And then another 300 of which are active every year in the work. And the rest might have come to an event, or they're receiving and reading our newsletter. But what we understand is that those kind of engagement ladders are going to they look like a funnel, right? Everyone's not going to have the most amount of time to give, but everyone can be a part of the network and get the information and the knowledge and figure out how they want to contribute, whether or not that's like signing a petition or making a call or coming out to something to learn more or reading the information that we share. So it's been a great journey, and it's just amazing and beautiful to see what the parents have accomplished by identifying the issues that matter to them, and then making that in a collective agenda where you might not get your issue picked this year, but you believe, because you've done it together, that this is the issue that matters to all of us, and then fighting for that issue to make change for kids. So they've quadrupled funding around out-of-school time programs. They got our school-based mental health program fully funded for our expansion to DCPS and public charter schools. So we have enough money in our budget for at least one mental health professional in every single school. And that was something they started on pre-pandemic. So that was not something they started talking about after the pandemic. It was something they started talking about well before, because parents saw this need for our kids coming even before they had to be centered at home on computers and devices. Our parents have sought for school funding, so now we have an at-risk fund for students who are furthest from need. They've raised the uniform per student funding formula. They've made sure that all these programs that we do are taking care of students with special needs, right? So that students with special needs have access to out-of-school time programs. They actually just launched, Deputy Mayor's office just announced a week ago that they're launching a portal for out-of-school time programs to make it easier, that mimics our enrollment system for schools.
Love that.
So, it's not just about dollars. That's part of what families have been able to do, but it's also about changing the way the system works so that it works better for people, and that it's hearing directly from the people themselves about how to make it work. And, as a person who went to the Harvard Kennedy School and sat around a bunch of fancy people, and my friends and folks are a lot of fancy people, if they had all the answers, we wouldn't be right here where we are right now. And that's why I think we need to listen to people better, and have people at the center of everything that we're doing so that they can push our ideas and our minds and make sure that our system is actually responsive to them.
That's great. And can you go deeper about kind of some of the day-to-day work and what it looks like? So, we know that you guys have the Parents Leader in Education program and the Parent Policy Summit. So whether it's those or others, can you give the audience a sense of like what the work looks like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so we have about 80 parents every year who do our Parent Leader in Education board. So those meet Of varying frequencies. We meet at least once a quarter in person, but recently we've been meeting once a month. And part of that is just we've got the federal stuff happening at the same time that the local stuff. I'm not sure if people are aware, but DC had some. We have to send our budget to Congress essentially, even though it's our tax revenue, and so we were not included in the budget resolution that was just passed. So we are having to make sure we don't have to cut $1 billion. Mostly we'll cut from schools and police. And so our parents meet regularly to figure out how do we need to understand and learn about the system, and then what do we want to do with that information. And then that culminates every year. So that's how they figure out what actions they want to take, right? They create their own campaign plans, around 2 issues that they identify. This year, in the past year, 2 years, we've been working on safe passage to school, knowing that that's been one of the major concerns, especially coming out of the pandemic for our kids, is getting to and from school safely to make sure that they're actually there every day. And the second is specialized school programs. So that's different kinds of school models centered throughout the city so that kids are not having to travel really far to get them, and that are open to a number of students. So like things like International Baccalaureate, dual enrollment programs, Reggio Emilio Montessori programs, dual language. But parents really understand every kid is different, and to meet their needs, you've got to provide different kinds of school models. One size does not fit all. But when we were doing a lot of school planning, we centered most of those schools, for instance, west of the Anacostia River. But the majority of our kids live east of the Anacostia River. So they have to travel across that river, which is very long commutes, and biases families that have a car, which is not everybody in a city in particular. So our parents have been thinking about, like, how do we make that more equitable? How do we think about the long-term outcomes from those programs for our kids? Like dual enrollment's a great example. Like, how is that cutting down on the cost of college? How is that making sure more kids complete college as they and get degrees? So they've pushed for an education through employment pathways database that looks at long-term outcomes from the investments we're making in our schools and the kinds of programs that we have and what's leading to the best outcomes in college and careers for kids. So those are 2 of the things parents have been pushing on this year, and they do things like they do testimonies. And they'll also testify on things that anything the council does. Like they just testified yesterday on a cell phone bill. And that's, those are kind of coming up in a lot of places. One of our council members proposed a bill to ban cell phones in our schools. And our parents on that one, they didn't have a collective idea of what they wanted to see happen. So right now they're just sharing their varied opinions on that legislation. But on things like safe passage, they have a statement that they've written together around safe passage. We work with coalition partners. So usually, because we don't want to just say, here's what parents think, we want actually to say, here's what a coalition of folks think. So the parents identify the issue, they identify what solutions they want, and they share those solutions with a coalition to say, do these actually work for schools? Do these actually work for our partners on the ground, community organizations who are doing this work with kids? And that doesn't mean that they get removed, but they get tweaked. So that then when we're proposing something, it can be done in a way that actually makes sense. And so a good example is a council member, Brooke Pinto, produced a piece of legislation this week, on Monday actually, called Peace DC. And she just pulled directly from those statements about some of the changes she wanted to see around the Safe Passage program for students. And we were happy to provide support for that because she was just taking parents' own language together with coalition partners to say, here's what we think should happen. So we're not a lobbying org because there's nothing I do. These are not the issues I pick. I'm not going and calling anyone. The parents are doing that themselves, and they're all volunteer. And so they're doing that work to identify what's important for them. Those issues are selected at a parent policy summit where everyone comes together to create an idea for what will be our collective agenda for the next 2 years. Parents present on 5 potential issues. And then all the parents in the room, we usually have about 100 to 150 parents, depending on like which year it's been in COVID or not, who are present. They get a ballot, but they have to first listen to all the parents do the presentations, and then they have to listen at each table to other parents sharing about what's important to them, because we think that's important. You want to vote, but you also want to hear your fellow parents, right? Because what you came in thinking is the most important might be different once you're listening. And I think that's what a lot of what we don't do in public policy processes is actually listen to one another. And it also helps that then if your issue doesn't get selected, you're not mad about it because you understand, but I was sitting at the table where I heard how much this issue matters to people who are not myself. And now I'm willing to get behind it. And so that happens at the end of every program year around June, first weekend in June. And then that is what we work on for the next year, putting the statements together, now doing the advocacy, working with the coalition. So we're in the midst of that right now until we get the mayor's budget to drop, and then we really know what's been invested in or anything that's been cut. But so far we're batting 1,000. Like, we haven't had an issue that our parents picked that hasn't seen change and in a positive way. So, and our parents have saved quite a few public programs to make sure that they're serving kids.
Wow. And you've mentioned the budget a little bit. I mean, understanding when you bring it up, it's like the local budget with the school district and the mayor. But obviously, as we record this in March of 2025, there's a
Yeah.
lot of budget conversations, particularly with the potential closure of the Department of Education
Yeah.
and potential funding cuts that could come along with that, depending upon who you listen and who you believe in the media. But at least from your perspective and all the leadership and all just your time in DC, kind of what are you thinking around ramifications and like what's going to work and what's not going to work in terms of kind of where we are politically in
Yeah.
connection to budget cuts and family engagement?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that's heartening, so our parents were actually just at the Hill yesterday. So it's been it's always a busy week when you do policy and advocacy, because they were talking about the DC budget and the impact that because of the way our budget works, and not just for this previous budget, but the continuing resolution that the House and Senate just passed usually includes a line to say DC can continue to spend its money as it's been spending it. It just didn't include that this time, which means that we would be subject to the same fiscal year budget cuts that the federal government is. So it was like an FY25 budget extension, but that said, you had to use FY24, the FY24 budget as the kind of the base of what you could spend. The challenge with that is things like, as you know, in schools, the most expensive thing is people. So things like retirement pensions go up, teacher salaries go up. You might have hired additional teachers. And so we're looking at a $1.1 billion cut in the middle of our fiscal year that we would have to do for the rest of the fiscal year. So we're already in FY25. Our budget was already approved by Congress for FY25, but because we didn't have that line in the larger federal budget, and we are subject to the oversight of the federal government, we would have to cut our own local revenue by tax revenue we've been spending by $1.1 billion. So we're in a particularly precarious situation because we don't want to let go of people. Like our charter schools, for instance, are looking at how, if we don't get a fourth quarter payment from the city, how would we cut staff or close schools early or remove tutoring programs. And that's hard because DC is right now the fastest growing place on NAEP. We had outsized results and we're leading the way on education recovery in one of the top states on that through the Harvard Center that came out with the Education Recovery Scorecard. And so we're excited to see that our growth on reading and math has been, great. And it's not where we want to be. We still have a lot of gaps between students. We still have a lot of growth to do. But we have invested a lot to make sure that our kids are getting high impact tutoring, that they are getting to and from school safely, that they're getting the kinds of learning experiences that are going to make sure that they can succeed, that we have science of reading, that we're thinking about a math hub, right? So all of that is at risk if we have to cut our budget mid-year, basically, and not because we don't have the money, but because we're tied into whatever is going on with the politics of the federal government, which are not our thing. So that's one thing we're dealing with. I think the other one is our parents have been active around the Department of Education, mostly because we want to make sure that the things that need to go to kids continue to go to kids, right? Like our title funds are incredibly important in terms of serving poor students in this country and making sure that we are giving them everything that they need. And it's oftentimes a supplement, to be honest, not just in cities, but in rural areas, right? And a lot of communities that are furthest from opportunity. And so, things like title funds, things like IDA, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, we want to make sure that funding is going and the resources and the oversight for students with disabilities are happening. And so our parents have been active in thinking about how are we making sure that we keep our our eyes on how all our students are doing, right? And that's something that we're invested in as a country, right? That we care about, making sure that we're closing gaps between students and making sure every kid can have an amazing and productive life, pre-K through 12 education. So those are some of the things our parents are active in and thinking about, and trying to make sure that we're like making sure it's clear we care about, and that we want to just keep our kids centered in all that we do.
And curious, Maya, with like the team you're leading at
Yeah.
PAVE, but as well as like all the families and the policy and advocacy work you're doing, how are you guys leveraging AI at all to
That is such a funny question, Greg.
help your work?
I used AI for the first time like two weeks ago.
Perfect, fresh. Tell the people, the fresh experience.
I was moderating a panel that someone asked me to do around AI. And I was like, before I moderate this panel, I guess I have to use one of these like Chat GPT things. I'm very old school. I'm a Luddite, right? Like I grew up like grammatically, like, diagramming sentences like from Warner's. So maybe it's just too ingrained for me from all of the edits I used to have to do in school. But I used it for the first time. I learned, and so then because I used it, everyone else in the room was basically already using it. So I guess I was like, okay, I guess I'm alone, as I talked to, this genius from the MIT lab about the work they were doing. So my team did reveal to me that they do use it lightly, because of the volume of things too. And they still send it to me. I still edit it with my old school, not a pad and paper. But I hate Google Docs. I cannot use it. No offense to Google, but I don't like track changes. I don't like Google Docs. I just like editing. So that's a better question for my team, because but as the MIT lab guy told me, as Dev told me, he was like, but AI is using you, because I'm sure it's feeding me things all the time. And I just don't realize it. So I don't know, to be honest, Greg. I am like the worst. I'm a 44-year-old woman who has no idea about AI. I should probably figure that out though, because it's here and my son is going to use it. So
we appreciate the honesty. We'll bring you back for part 2 when you're an AI
so once
whiz.
I've like gotten better at this.
And yeah, I mean, you started saying about how much you love learning new skills and everything else, but somehow skipped over the AI skill set. But you still got time, I think.
But I feel like AI takes my skills away. Like I want to go research. I want to dig.
Do you think that's like part of the mental block? Is that it's like not really a skill?
I do. Like I used to go get. I had 3 sets of encyclopedias as a kid, and I used to love to go to each of them and see what they said differently. Like World Book versus Encyclopedia Britannica. Like that was like.
Oh wow, that's next level. Yeah, that's.
I wanted to compare my information, right? I like my primary sources, my secondary sources, I need to change my whole orientation for this one. So I did grow up on Mavis Beacon teaches typing, so I'm a very good typist, but
not concerned about that. It's a good segue in terms of like leadership principles or philosophies that guide Maya's leadership. What would you offer?
Yeah, I think to me, I just try and marry excellence with heart. Like I really do believe in trying to give the best that I can to our families. I think a lot of times, that has not been the structure of the way that they receive things. I think people are just trying to get things done, and that's not my goal. My goal is to give them the best that I can give them. And that doesn't mean it's perfect, but it does mean, I tried my hardest as a leader. And I focus on that with my team. I think the other thing is heart. Like I want everyone to know that I care about them personally, that I love them. And that doesn't mean we're always going to agree, or it's always hunky-dory, but that love is centered in the work. And that the reason we all do this work is because we care. We care about our own kids. We care about all the kids in our city. We care about our city that should be a state, right? And all of her people. We care, right? And I think that heart has to be at the center of everything that we do. And so I try and really, as a leader, just demonstrate and lead my team and our families and our partners with a focus on excellence plus heart.
I love that. Let's get you out here on a few semi-fun rapid-fire questions.
Sure, let's do it.
I know, from my opinion, there are a lot of incredible organizations and leaders across the country leading work in the family engagement, family empowerment space. Curious who you look to beyond DC in this space that are doing really good work.
Oh my God, so many. So in your hometown or your former town in Tennessee, we've got Sarah Carpenter and Memphis Lift, and I love Sarah. And I feel like she's a leader that leads very similarly, like excellence plus heart.
Yep.
I love the national work Carrie Rodriguez, the National Parents Union, has been doing, and they've been super helpful to us as we think about more in the national space. I learned a lot from Innovate in California, and Matt and Jose. And I took their community organizer training program years ago and married that with the work I had gotten from Marshall Gans. And like, it's just, I feel like I learned so much from so many different people. That's like such a hard question because there are just so many good people everywhere who are trying to do this work and do it right for kids. But there are a lot of superstars that are out there who are keeping the heartbeats.
What musical artist are you listening to right now, whether it's toddler Spotify version or adult Spotify version?
So my Spotify Wrapped has always consistently been Whitney Houston because I'm Whitney Houston's biggest fan, and it doesn't matter at any period. But my first concert was Whitney Houston in Madison Square Garden in 1988.
Love that.
So yeah, it came in big. Thank you, Grandma.
Yep.
So Mom was not paying for that. So, but that was amazing. And so I'm always a Whitney fan, but for a few years ago, I kept saying to my husband, "What is a Bad Bunny? I don't understand what's a Bad Bunny." And my husband thought that was really funny. But now I love Bad Bunny. His newest album is like absolute hot fire. Probably because maybe there's some small corner of my heart that's like an old New York grandma. So I'm definitely descended from them. So I love Nueva York. I love Nueva York. I love the whole album. And I told my husband he needs to take me to Puerto Rico for the concert. He's not bought those tickets yet, but I don't know who's going to take care of the toddler. Grandma probably wants to go too because my mom's a partier. But no, I love that. My son has me listening to Wicked a lot, and he can sing What Is This Feeling pretty much from beginning to end. So he's a Wicked fan. He's a Moana fan. He's an Encanto fan. He is a Zoom, 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 we're going to the moon fan. And that's kind of what took over my Spotify Wrapped. But if it was left to my own devices, it would be Whitney Houston, old school 90s R&B, and now Bad Bunny. What is Bad Bunny? But a great album. So.
What's one thing our listening audience can do to support you and the work of PAVE?
You can just make sure that in your own communities, you guys are raising the voices of parents, that you're building community with each other, that you're listening to each other, and that if you ever come to DC, hit us up and you can join one of our great parties. We throw really good parties. And by parties, I mean that these are times you're going to work. We're going to do policy work, but we're going to have fun. I'm serious. We always have ginger ale there because it's a solve for all things, as we believe in our culture. And then we'll always have good food, good people. We always have a DJ. And then we do hard work. So hit us up when you're in DC and we'll make sure you're well taken care of and that you have something fun to do while you work hard.
And what does Square Pizza remind you of?
Square Pizza reminds me of a Sicilian pizza, probably. So, I mean, I'm in New York, right? So but I think Square Pizza is delicious. Sicilian pizza, I've had it in Sicily and it is really, really good. So Square Pizza reminds me of good things, like heartwarming and full and a little fluffier than the flat New York pizza. So
we'll take that. That's great. MC Maya, thank you for being an MC. Thanks for all the leadership and the guidance and the insights you dropped today and everything you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Greg. And I hope that you have a great rest of your week. And your next podcast guest has actually used AI in a real way. So can answer that question.
We'll see what we can do.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for checking out Square Pizza Pod, making a few selfish requests. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps spread the word about the podcast, and share this with a friend. We appreciate it. Thanks.